75 Cadillac. I've got the top roll back on a southern born and cloudy day.
Welcome to the Only One Shot Golf Podcast. I'm Jim Gallagher Jr., and I'll be your host today. It's been a couple weeks off since we've done a podcast, and we're back at it today. And we've got Gary Christian, who played his college golf at Auburn, a couple wins on the Korn Ferry Tour, 30 mini tour wins. Pretty cool little career he had there. Now he's into the broadcasting side, on the TV side. He's done some Golf Channel. He's worked for ESPN Plus, PGA Tour Entertainment, done some of that stuff on the ground. Very bright guy, very good player as well, and can't wait to get to hear from him. He's got a new book out. It's called Beat the Course, Not Yourself. We could all use that. I know we all struggle with that, but Gary's one of the good guys, and can't wait for you to get to know Gary just a little bit better. Well, let's welcome Gary Christian to the podcast. Gary, I appreciate you spending some time with me.
Well, great. Thanks for having me on, Jim. Nice to hear those dulcet tones of yours again.
Well, that's not an Alabama accent, but you've got going there. So can you tell us what your early influences were and where you grew up, and tell us how you got started in the game?
Yeah. Like I would imagine, like most of us, my dad got me into it. He was an avid golfer and went down a rummage sale one day, chopped down 4 clubs. So I was really Bryson DeChambeau before Bryson was around. I got 4 clubs. The putter is the same length as the driver, and that's how I learned to play. 2 hickory shafts and a mishmash of the other 2 clubs. So he got me into it and kind of learned just without lessons, just from his kind of wisdom of giving me a good grip and teaching me to make a divot in front of the ball. And that was basically it. And did all the team sports and picked it up again when I was 14 and got down to a scratch, but I'm unlike many players who made their living at it later in life, I had a full-time job out of school. So I was playing twice a week against everyone else who was playing 7 days a week. So really the only option I had was to go to America and try and get a golf scholarship.
What was that? What was that other job? I don't mean to interrupt you, but what was that other job?
It was the most boring job in England. So it was a pensions administrator, which sounds bad enough. But until you actually did that job, you don't realize how boring it actually was. So I was locked in an office 8 hours a day, and all I wanted to do was play golf. And so it was a great opportunity to come over here. And it didn't matter where I was. I just wanted to play 7 days a week and practice and get as good as I could. And I had 2 years at junior college in Cullman in Alabama, and then played really well there and got a scholarship to Auburn.
Well, tell us let's go back to team sports. How important is it, and you've been around the game a long time, I think it's vital to these, that's why we're seeing so many great players. How important is it for kids to play a team sport before, maybe deciding to stick into golf full time?
Oh, yeah, I think it's vital. I mean, when you hear, you talk to Jordan Spieth, he played baseball and he played other sports. It's just you've got to develop every type of movement pattern, whether it's a throw in motion because that's weight transference, whether it's a jump in motion because that's explosive motion, balance in soccer, the ability to accelerate and stop and change direction. All of these things are so helpful for every sport you play, and especially golf. So, I think I like what the PGA of America have done with kind of adopting the American development model, where they encourage kids to play every sport they can. And then, maybe you start to specialize 15, 16 years on because, now, if you want to play competitively, you need the time to kind of devote to perfect your craft. So I really like what they do with that. And now there's kind of a plan for players. But I would encourage every parent whose kid is 10, 12 and he's enjoying golf, just to encourage them to just keep playing every other sport they possibly can.
Yeah, I think they've been listening to us because that's one thing we really feel is important, to play the other sports, and you explained it so well and how it does help in golf. I mean, you can play different seasons and then you can decide to specialize later, but how did you get to Auburn? Why did you choose Auburn?
Yeah, well, they chose me. So I had 2 years at junior college, and I won a bunch of tournaments, and I was an All-American my sophomore year, and it was basically between Auburn and UAB. So I guess I was always destined to stay in Alabama, and I'm really glad I went to Auburn. It's a phenomenal school. Obviously it's great now to see them as national champions with their men's golf team. And my son goes to UAB. So I guess I got everything covered now. So I really, really enjoyed living in Alabama and Birmingham in particular, and seen the city just develop and really take off and modernize. And it's a great place to live now.
Yeah, it's a great little golf town, that's for sure. But what were some of the
Yeah.
highlights of your college golf when you were at Auburn? You mentioned the junior college, but what was it like those 2 years at Auburn?
Yeah, it was really, really fun. I was all SEC my first year, and then made as all professional golfers in their future life make a million mistakes. I made the mistake of changing equipment because my friend changed equipment and all of a sudden started beating me. So I knew it couldn't be him; it had to be the equipment. And so I picked the same equipment, and it wasn't the equipment; it was me. So I went from number 1 on the team to number 5 on the team, and it was just unfortunately, that was basically the end of the journey. I was ready to go home because you're not going to make a living shooting 75 every time you play, and I had so many very lucky meetings and very lucky friendships, and a family that I met tailgating at Auburn liked me, liked my personality, and they said, "Hey, come live with us for a few years, and we'll see if we can get your game back." And that gave me that opportunity because I was probably getting ready to sharpen the pencil and become a pensions administrator again.
So when did you decide to turn pro? At what point was that that was in
Well,
your dream?
yeah, well, like most English people, we're maybe a little bit more realistic than our American counterparts. So I knew I had no business turning pro out of college. The next year, I was playing every day and I was getting better. Now I was shooting par. I knew I had no business turning pro. The next year, I was shooting in the 60s every time. And when I traveled, it was par or better. I knew I had no reason to turn pro. And then that next year, like 3 years after I left Auburn, was when I started shooting in the mid-60s every time I played at home, and then in the 60s every time I traveled. And I knew then that I had the game that I could justify turning pro. And some people backed me, and I won 4 times my first year as a mini tour player. Got through final stage of qualifying score, and I thought, man, this is going to be easy. Lost my card immediately on what was then the Nike Tour, now the Corn Ferry Tour, and it took me 6 years to get back to the Corn Ferry Tour. So
Wow.
it was a very, very long, winding journey, and then 6 years on the Corn Ferry Tour before I made the PGA Tour. So I was one of the oldest true rookies in the history of the PGA Tour at 40 years old.
Wow, that's true. You were. When you think about it, we just saw Blades Brown, the young junior, high school, 17. Great player. Watched him play at Myrtle Beach, but 17 years old. I mean, what's your advice when you see kids and you're teaching them and you're mentoring these kids turning pro early? There's a Jordan Spieth or a Justin Thomas every once in a while, or a Akshay. I mean, there's just not that many. I mean, what's your advice for that?
Well, I think, you look at Akshay, it's the perfect example. Akshay turned pro at 17 and had a horrific 2 or 3 years where completely lost all the confidence he had, really plumbed the depths of, being a pro, even wanting to be a pro, where I had to go back to the mini tour. So it was a huge, dose of humble pie to go from, a teenage phenom playing in the Walker Cup to, having no chance making cuts on the invites he got, and then having to go back to the mini tours and kind of start from scratch. And then, I followed him on the Corn Ferry Tour, where he almost made it in his first year, and then obviously made it in his second year and won on tour. So it's so hard when you've had that upward trajectory your whole career, and then all of a sudden you plateau, or in many respects get worse. That's really, really hard to accept that, because you're never used to having experienced failure. And so, for a young player, it is, you just got to do everything you can do in your control, learn as much as you possibly can. Don't base everything on results, but concentrate on what it is you're taking care of. And then at the end of the day, you can't put any other blame on anyone but yourself, because you're doing everything you can. And then you'll see the results come. And sometimes, as you say, there's, once every few years, there's a guy that it immediately happens and you see Jordan Spieth. But then there's another 50 or 60 who it doesn't happen for. And they've then got to kind of go back and find out what it is they've learned from these experiences, and then use the time and coaching and a team around them to get things back on track.
Yeah, because professional golf's getting younger. The LPGA, we see that a lot of young players. But you mentioned your pro career. How did you get into broadcasting? Because you've been doing that now for a few years. And how did you get started? Who got you started in that?
Well, it's been about a decade now. So I was a rookie at 40 and I was retired at 42. I shredded my knee at the Canadian Open. And yeah, that was it. So I worked so hard to get there, and I only got to enjoy it for a year and a half.
Wow.
And just out of the blue, again, one of those lucky experiences, I out of the blue called Sky Sports, the executive producer at Sky Sports in the UK, and said, hey, look, I've had to retire. You may have remembered covering me because they would focus on British golfers. And they said, oh, yeah, we enjoyed covering you playing with Tiger Woods at the Barclays and the FedEx Cup playoffs. Yeah, what are you doing? I said, well, I got some bad news. I got injured. And they said, well, if you want to get into broadcasting, you're kind of the guy we're looking for, because we need an English voice to cover the PGA Tour, but someone who's actually played on the PGA Tour, because all of our guys are all European DP World Tour former players. So it was just a perfect time for me to make that call. And he said, the only thing, you're going to have to fly to London and come do it every few weeks. So I had an unbelievable opportunity to go home 17 weeks a year for 2 years straight.
Wow.
Where I got to, start my career, get a body of work, get a little bit of a profile that then led to PGA Tour Live and the Golf Channel and ESPN. But it was all as a result of that phone call, and I got to spend time with my parents that I never thought I would spend time with them, my friends, and it was just an amazing opportunity. And what I really enjoyed was, from my perspective with golf, because it was injury that took my career, I never fell out of love with the game. A lot of broadcasters, the reason they broadcast is because the last few years are really tough. They don't play very well, and they kind of fall out of love a little bit. I was, in effect, pretty lucky in that I finished at basically the top of my powers. And I actually, before my third and final knee surgery, which again didn't work, I got a call out of the blue to play Pebble Beach in the old Callaway or TaylorMade Pro-Am. And as it was the case in many of my events, I missed the cut by a shot. I got a call that night, and they said, hey, Pro had to go home, or he missed the cut and his team needs someone to fill in. Would you mind filling in on Sunday? So I got to play my last round as a pro at Pebble Beach.
Wow.
And I hit every fairway and every green in my last round as a proper pro. So it was like the perfect way to tie up a career and just end it on an iconic golf course playing a perfect round of golf.
Yeah, drop the mic and go on. That is a cool story.
Exactly.
You talked about that, the love of the game, and I think that's why we all got started. Now we look at the money they're playing for, and everything's become. It's not just golf. Every sport, college, even college and the NIL, the whole thing. Is money getting too big? Is it taking over the love of the game, do you think?
I think it has, and I think. People are playing for the wrong reason, and they're going to schools for the wrong reason, and they're making decisions for the wrong reason. Obviously, the right financial reason for them, but maybe for their career and maybe for longevity, it may not be the right decision. And I think when you look at social media and you look at kind of the voice of the fans, there's a lot of rumblings, aren't there, about how much more money is at the forefront of a lot of what we see and read and hear about. The latest thing with the Ryder Cup thing, I just think that it's another one of those items, those news items that just make people kind of sit up and listen again and say, God, I don't know, this is maybe not the game that I got into originally for the love of it and the competitiveness and the stories and what it means to have a life-changing win, not necessarily for the finances, but for, all of that sacrifice, all of that hard work. And you see it in those interviews, don't you? Watching Rafa Campos when he won on the PGA Tour recently, he wasn't thinking of how much money he just won there. He was thinking about those days that he didn't know if he was going to be able to play golf anymore. Injuries, not having enough money to continue, losing his card on the Corn Ferry Tour or on the PGA Tour. He lost 50 pounds in weight and had to rethink how he went about the game and kind of relearn how to swing. And now all of a sudden, that's the fruits of all of that labor, all of those sacrifices. And to me, that was such a powerful moment. And at the end of that, there wasn't one thought of money. There wasn't one thought of what this meant to the bank account. It was all what it meant to that individual and all of those hard things that had happened over the years. I thought it was one of the most powerful moments of the year.
Yeah, no doubt. And you look at Q School. We just got done. 5 guys get their, 6 guys actually got their card. The rest play Corn Ferry Tour. And I'm afraid if you want to cut to the low 100, top 100, that's fine. But cutting back the field sizes and the excuse they use, the competitive part, it just kind of irks me because the signature events don't have a cut for the most part, except for a few. I don't know, the rich get richer, but I mean, it's just like they've protected themselves. To me, it looks like outside looking in. And once you're in, it's tough to get out. And once you're out, it's tough to get back in. And there's no guarantees. I think it's going to get even tougher for these guys to get in now.
Yeah, there's part of me that actually, I actually do like that in respect. If I took the money out of it, I like the feeling of excellence of earning this spot in this limited field tournament. I always thought top 125, you could kind of manage your way through a year, and you wouldn't have to play exceptional. And at the end of it, you've got a job for the rest of the year, and you're ready to go again. I think now you have got to completely rearrange how you go about and how you think about the game, and how you dedicate yourself to the game to reach the absolute elite levels to justify getting in these fields. And so there's a big part of me that love it. And there's a part of me that it's obviously changed the game in a completely different direction. So I'm really fascinated to see how it's all going to shake out over the next few years, and how we all get used to it, and how the players get used to going about their jobs as well.
Yeah, I mean, the top 100, I could live with that. I mean, VJ Trolio, who wrote the book Only One Shot, I think it was our second podcast or third podcast, he talked about where the 125 to 150 guys are not, there's not a whole lot of difference between them and some of the top college players. So, excellence should be excellence. It just, everybody loves that feel-good story, and maybe we'll still get them. But you've got a book out now, and it's kind of cool. It's called Beat the Course, Not Yourself. Tell us a little bit about that, and then we're going to kind of go through some stuff and some questions I had when I read through the book. And how'd you get started, and tell us about it.
Yeah, I had time on my hands. That was probably the greatest thing. I've always wanted to write a book, and the reason I got the most out of my limited physical talents was because I dedicated myself to the mental side of the game. I wouldn't have ever made with the Corn Ferry Tour, let alone the PGA Tour, had I not understood that my competitive advantage could come from being mentally and emotionally more tough than the majority of the field. So I made a conscious decision back in 2004, to just dedicate myself 100% to that, and spend less time practicing, more time visualizing and learning how to relax on cue and just everything that comes with it. And so, again, I go back to the ADM model. I was talking to Susie Whaley about it, who I work with on PGA Tour Live and some with the Golf Channel. And, we were talking about, when you get to 15, 16 and you kind of start to specialize in golf, now we need to get a little taste of the mental side of the game, because that is the right kind of time when you're old enough to understand it and implement it. But I never thought there was really a book that really talked to competitive teenagers. I think the last thing a teenager wants to read is a school textbook type of psychology book that they give up after a couple of paragraphs because it's just, it's too complicated, or they just don't quite understand it. So I co-wrote this with Dr. Kurt Ickes, who wrote some baseball books for competitive baseball players who are like 12 and 13. And he wrote it in the form of a story. and he wanted to write a golf book, and he used me with my golf knowledge and me and him kind of working together to write this really cool story and through the eyes of this 15-year-old Jack who, like most teenage golfers playing in competitions, would beat themselves and would play really well and then all of a sudden lose it, and especially when the pressure was on. So, the story talks about him, making the commitment to talk to some lovely, wise old pro that may or may not be based on me. And he gives him some wisdom, and they work on a routine, and they work on how to control themselves in between shots, relax, get their mind on productive thinking, all the things that we do as PGA Tour players, but in the words and in the language of teenagers. And I think it's a really powerful story, and we were really happy to get Susie Whaley to write the foreword, but also Nick Kleinert, the head men's golf coach at Auburn, who won the national championship and is the national coach of the year in men's golf. And, he's basically said this is validation, this book, of kind of what he looks for in when he's recruiting. So it's a very powerful tool, and it's a really nice game plan for competitive teenagers to maybe rise above their competition and show some attributes that college coaches will certainly pay attention to. It's an easy read. It's a fun read. It'll take you about an hour to read. And at the end of each chapter, you have little action plans where you kind of can write some answers based on that chapter, but base it on yourself and kind of your experiences. And it's one of those books I like to, kind of encourage players to have a highlighter and a pen and just make notes and highlight passages and reread it, and you'll get a lot out of it.
Well, you mentioned that, and I guess I thought I was just a speed reader because I went through it pretty quick and I looked at those questions. But you talk about mastering your mind, and I always felt like the best players, and I've heard Patty T talk about it last week at the Grant Thornton Tava Taniket and Knapp win, how she said she was playing with freedom. How do you master your mind and keep that negative self-talk? Because if I'd have known then what I know now, I'd have doubled my winnings, no question. Because I was sometimes I was my worst enemy. I wasn't my best friend.
Yeah.
How do you master that mindset?
Well, we're highly evolved creatures that we should be in control of what we say to ourselves, shouldn't we? I mean, just from if you go through a word search of the book, I think the two words of control and awareness are two of the most popular words in the book.
Mm-hmm.
I think awareness is such an underrated word in golf, where we're not aware of what we're saying to ourselves. We're not aware of our decision making. We're not aware of how uncommitted we are. We're just not aware at all most of the time on the golf course. And if we can be a little bit more aware of what we're seeing or what we're feeling or how our body's feeling, we can take steps to change it around. We're not aware of tension in our body until we lose one way right because we couldn't release the club properly because our shoulders and our arms are so tight, we're gripping the club like a death grip. But if we, on a consistent basis, are trying to be aware of our body and how tight we are and taking action to reduce that tension, we've got a much better chance of playing better in competition when it counts, with all the adrenaline, with all the distractions, with all the things that are going on. And it's the same with our thoughts and the ability to be able to have a productive routine, react in an objective manner, and then take some time off golf between shots and then recommit to the routine, recommit to productive reaction, and then continue that cycle. It doesn't guarantee success, but it's going to give you a much better chance of hitting a good shot, or a decent shot at least, and less destructive shots. It's when we have not a very productive routine, which leads to a poor shot and then a bad reaction, and then we spend 5 minutes stewing over it until the next shot, and then that affects the next routine and the next shot, and then that cycle continues. And so this book just helps give you some clear, easy, simple exercises that, to me, it all starts on the practice range of how you practice and learning what it is that you can and can't do, and then understanding that they're the things that you can and can't bring onto the golf course. Because if we hit shots on the golf course that we don't know we can hit, the chances are we're not going to hit a very good shot, and the chances are that's going to lead to a bad reaction and then bad things happening. So it's well worth a read, because as I said, it's clear, it's simple, and it's something you would be able to take to the range and then to the course very quickly.
Interesting. You said something my wife would tell me when I was beating myself up. She would say, "Would you speak to your kids the way you're talking to yourself?" And I'm going,
Exactly.
"Well, no,
Ex-
no." So why are you doing it, you big dummy? So
Exactly.
you talk about a routine. Explain to our listeners. I mean, how would you create a pre-shot routine? What because mine's pretty quick. I play so fast, but
Yeah.
they don't. We talk about routines, but we don't tell anybody how to create one. What would be your advice on that?
Well, really, we're just trying to create a consistent pattern of thought, aren't we? Before we hit every shot, and for someone like you, you can do it in 5 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
For maybe someone more analytical, it might take 20 seconds. But it's what I love talking about on TV is there's a million different swings that have the names on the bags on the PGA Tour. Freddie Couples swings it different from Zach Johnson, who swings it different from Jordan Spieth, who swings it different from Scotty Scheffler. But they all have a relatively consistent routine that mirrors each other's play and mirrors their personalities. But they're basically all doing the same thing. They are, spending the time to commit to the shot that they know is the best chance of success. They are seeing it, feeling it, visualizing it, make it a practice swing that has some intention to it, setting up as consistently they can, connect to the target, and then let it go. And then once you've done that, there's nothing else you can do. You've done everything you can do. It's when you stand up over a shot, and as you're over the shot, man, I got the wrong club here, or I know this is the wrong choice, and you still hit it anyway. That's your fault. That's everything that you had control of. So when you've hit that shot, you're going to have regrets. We want to hit every shot with no regret, even if it's a bad shot. We can look ourselves in the mirror at the end of it and say, you know what, I couldn't have done anything different. Golf's a really hard game, and I've just hit a bad shot. It may be a bad lie. It may have been, ball below my feet, and it was just a difficult shot, and I did everything I could do, and it's ended up in a bad spot. It's when you have hit the shot and say, God, I wish I'd done this, and this differently. And no wonder I hit it in the water, and man, I'm an idiot. I can't believe I'm doing this to myself again. That's when that bad cycle of thoughts happens.
Yeah, I think you said it. Your personality, consistency, and I think when you're consistent with it, when you're under pressure, you'll perform a lot better. But back to that being your own best friend. I mean, you're going to hit bad shots. You just can't beat yourself up about it. I always, when I worked with Dr. Coop, who was a sports psychologist at North Carolina, it was about focus. And I always said, Doc, they're so slow out here. I can't concentrate for 4:45. He goes, you're only concentrating for, maybe 20 minutes, 30 minutes total for the whole round. Find something to do in between shots. But you mentioned about hitting a shot, and you got focus. How do you get back and refocus maybe, or get kind of that bounce back after a bad shot?
Yeah, well, that's what I was kind of talking about as well. With from walking from one shot to another, as you said, if you spend 4.5 hours thinking about golf and obsessing about golf, you're going to be exhausted by the end of it. So you want some distractions between shots. So whether it's talking about sports with your caddy or your playing partner, or Freddie Couples used to outline the trees, and Dave Stockton used to look for wildlife. You could look at houses, you could do anything you want. And then as you start to get, maybe 20, 30 yards away from your next shot, then now you start to say, okay, now it's time to narrow the focus. Now it's time to start the process to get myself ready to hit this next shot. And then you go through your process, you go through your routine, you hit the shot, and then you have that reaction. And then if you hit the bad shot, a lot of the time, if you ask yourself objectively, a series, some questions, a lot of the time you'll find the answer, which then you can then say, okay, let me just focus on that a little bit more on the next shot. So, maybe you say to yourself, how committed was I really to that shot? If I'm being honest, I knew I should have hit the 7, and I was trying to force the 8. And so, I can say from that, okay, on the next shot, I'm going to make the commitment part of this process just a little bit more, maybe take a little bit longer, maybe really focus on that to give myself the best chance of knowing I'm making the right decision here. Maybe I made a practice swing and I really wasn't even thinking of anything. I might as well not have made the practice swing. And maybe I can say, okay, next time, I'm going to be a little bit more intentional about feeling that fade I'm trying to hit, as opposed to just swinging my arms at it and getting in a bad habit. And so I think there's that way of, instead of you then panicking and starting to think, what do I do with my swing? Did I move my head too much, or did I throw my hands at it, or did my knee go in the wrong spot, or my hips not turn right? Now you've got a million thoughts in your head, and you're absolutely dead on the next shot. And so, I always go back to, you do all your hard work in preparation on the range and in the practice rounds. So when you play, when it counts, your mind is freer because you've done all the hard work already.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's well spoken. That's well said. I mean, process. We talk about that. VJ Trolio, he pushes process with his students, and I think everybody does. Intentional. I love the wording there. Like pressure and anxiety happens in all of us, no matter something. We got the biggest round, or we could make it bigger than it is. How did you deal with pressure? Like, we got the big round going into the final round, you get a chance to win. How did you deal with pressure, and how do you advise some of the people that you're teaching and helping out?
It's all cliches, isn't it?
Yeah.
It is process. You read every single golf psychology book. They all say the same thing. So if the experts say the same thing, there's validity to it. And so it is that even greater commitment to the routine. It is working on breathing, working on deep breathing, which I would practice off the course to learn how to deep breathe and learn how to bring my heart rate down. I would learn how to relax on cue by doing deep muscle relaxation. And, I'd just grip a club as hard as I could for about 20 seconds and then release it. And then all of a sudden, I was still a little bit tense, but I was a whole lot less tense than I was 20 seconds before. So there was just all these techniques that I would use that helped me in the most stressful situations get the most out of what I was trying to do. And, it may not have been pretty, but at least it gave me a better chance. If it gives me a 25% better chance of achieving what I'm trying to achieve, then that's a huge difference compared with maybe everyone else who's struggling at that stage.
Yeah, well, I'm going to answer my own question with the goals and expectations. How do you deal with it? It's process. It's all the same stuff. But we talk about, and I think you see the difference when you see junior golfers and college players. And I had a young man that played college golf at an SEC school, and he was telling me just the way I played my practice round, my preparation, was so much different than they did in college. What advice do you have for the junior golfers out there listening when they go to play a course they've never seen, and kind of preparing in the practice round? Because some people get focused on how they're hitting it, and they don't pay attention to the golf course.
Oh, exactly. I used to stay with families most weeks when I was a professional. I was too cheap to buy a nice hotel room, so it was either a rubbish hotel room or stay in a nice house with nice people. So I always stayed with nice people. And I would come in for my practice rounds, and the first question they asked was, what did you shoot? And I said, I don't keep scoring practice rounds. I said, I really don't even like calling it a practice round. I like calling it a learning round. Okay. And so I want to, when I talk about the routine, for me, the most important step of my routine was commitment. And so if I have learned the course in a day or two, and I know exactly where I can and can't miss it, and I know exactly where the trouble is, and I know exactly what the carries are, and everything that comes with making the most committed, correct decision possible, I can make the freest swing possible. And when I make the freest swing possible, I play my best golf. And so what I would say to juniors is, instead of hitting 4 7-irons in the middle of the fairway, hit 1 7-iron onto the green, pick it up, and now start walking around the green and start putting the ball in a short-sided position and see if you can get that ball close enough to get it up and down. Because you're going to know that the flags are going to be in certain positions on the greens in tournaments. So, if we know a flag's going to be in a certain position, we've got to know where we can and can't miss it. And so if we have learned in the practice round that, man, that short side, I've got zero chance of getting this up and down. Well, now that helps me make my decision of where I want to aim that ball or that iron shot, where I'm going to take that miss out of play. And if I can take that miss out of play, 2 or 3 times around, that may be the difference between, 3 bogeys, potentially a couple of double bogeys thrown in there. So that's that. When I used to, do my yardage book and everything, I would do my own yardage book, because obviously on the mini tours and junior golf, you wouldn't get a yardage book given to you. Now in college, some junior events, they get yardage books. What I would do is just chart out where I can and can't miss around a green. And then when you see that flag anywhere near that area, that's a flag that you got no business trying to get too close to, because for the upside of getting it close, you bring a potential double bogey into play.
Yeah, that's great advice. Now, the question I always ask, and it's you've been amongst the best, you've played against them, now you're covering them. What separates that elite player from the rest?
I think it's just that, just taking care of every single thing that they can take care of, whether it's swing related, whether it is physical conditioning related, whether it's nutrition related, psychology related. There's just a million things that you have to excel at to get the very most out of your game. And the standard of golf is so high now. I don't think I could make the Auburn golf team, let alone travel and play on the Auburn golf team, because the standard's so high. So you're playing at such a high level. If you want to get the most out of your college career or your junior career or your professional career, you have to watch what the best players in the world do. And the best players in the world have a team around them. It's not cheap. And so golf, you've got to back yourself. You've got to have people behind you. You've got to have finances. And that's going to give you the best chance to have success. But once you've got all of that, you have to have that ability to learn how to practice correctly and learn how to practice that's going to transfer to the golf course. You have to learn as many shots as you possibly can to be able to, not be hamstrung by the inability to hit certain shots. I would still say, though, one-dimensional play is the best thing off the tee. If you're a fader of the ball, hit a fade as much as you possibly can.
Yeah.
And get that, have the most confident swing and physical motion that you can possibly have, because you're going to have more success with that. And if a hole doesn't set up well for that shape, then you change your target and you change your club. But I see too many people trying to hit too many different shapes that they haven't perfected on the practice range, where they're a fader all the time, and then all of a sudden they see a right to left hole and they try and draw a driver, and you ask them, how often do you practice that shot? Well, occasionally. I said, well, that really shouldn't give you the confidence that you should bring that out in a tournament. And so, part of the book talks about, practice. Only bring into the tournaments the shots you can hit. If you think you can hit it and you're not sure, it's probably not the right choice.
Yeah, there's something I think also is, and I hear John Cooks talk about it all the time. He says, get comfortable in uncomfortable situations. How did you deal with that? How did you get comfortable in an uncomfortable situation?
Well, you got to practice and play under pressure. As much as you could do that, whether it's betting, whether it's challenge yourself when you're on your own, to hit certain shots on the range to certain targets, and, give yourself a target. And if you don't reach that target, then you start again. I think there's a lot of, I think competition has been lost a little bit especially with the younger generation. They like to practice on their own, and they don't like, playing games against each other. I would encourage, I think you and I were probably very similar. We loved having competition. We loved playing against our buddies and practicing against our buddies and having chip-offs and putt-offs and stymie games, and on the range, who can shape it the furthest, who can hit the closest, all of these things. Competition is everything. And I talked to Coach Fields at Texas, and I asked, what separates Jordan Spieth and Scotty Scheffler and all those great players you coached? I don't think that last word was out of my mouth before he answered ultra competitiveness.
Absolutely.
And that's what separates the greats. I played with Tom Watson when he was 62 years old on the tour. And I couldn't believe the level of competitiveness he still had in his early 60s. We played a little Tuesday game. Me and him played KJ Choi and Danny Lee. And it was just amazing. When the bet got right, he all of a sudden just turned it on. But you never lose it. You never lose that ultra competitiveness. And he didn't care that KJ Choi was a great player and Danny Lee was a great up and coming player. He just knew that when he needed to turn it on, he could turn it on. And it was phenomenal watching.
Absolutely. Inner drive to be great. No question about it.
Yeah.
Before I let you go, what's up next for you?
Well, just finishing off this year, and then I'll be covering the Amex with PGA Tour Live, and it's just for me, it's just sort of piecing together what I can with a media schedule, but also doing a little bit of teaching and coaching. Hopefully the book will sell well. It's certainly designed for competitive teenagers, but I think parents should read it just as much as the teenagers, because you've watched your daughters playing junior golf. You've lived through what it is to be a competitive golfer. There's a lot of parents that haven't lived through that and just don't understand when they see the same mistakes every single tournament, and their son or daughter being in the middle of the fairway with a wedge in their hand and walking off with a double bogey. Well, this book will help to explain to them why these things happen on a consistent basis. And so whether it's a parent or a kid playing competitively, or just someone who wants to play better in a dogfight or club championship, this book is a really easy read. It's going to help you. But I'm branching off into all kinds of things, travel hosting and putting together golf trips to the UK, some corporate afternoons, and some public speaking. So my journey is certainly one of those journeys that certainly a very different path to almost anyone who's played on the PGA Tour before. So it's a good lesson in life. From my journey relates so well to business, with resilience and pivots and mentorship and all those things that help me get the most out of my career.
Absolutely. Where can they find the book? I forgot to ask that.
Yeah, it's on Amazon. Okay. So Beat the Course, Not Yourself. It's on Amazon. It's actually the #1 new release bestseller in golf coaching. So
awesome.
We're very proud of that. And I'd love for your listeners to go get a copy. It's you can still get it in time for Christmas.
That's a good idea.
But also check out my website. Yeah, check out my website, GaryChristianGolf.com. So that kind of tells you a little bit more about me and the other bits and pieces I do. But the book, for less than the price of a sleeve of golf balls, it'd be the perfect stocking stuffer.
Absolutely. Well, Gary, I appreciate you being with us. Merry Christmas to you and your family. And I'll see you at Amex. I'm working Golf Channel that week. I'll be on the ground, so I'll be hanging out there.
Awesome. Same to you, Jim. Have a great Christmas. And it was really great catching up again.
Well, that was a fascinating conversation. What a smart guy. Just and simplified things. I think that's the key to it. I mean, process, be intentional, commit to the shot, be your own best friend. Things we know, but we don't do. Not sure why we don't, but we don't. That's what makes the golf such a tough game. But you got to be your own best friend out there, because you're on an island sometimes and you don't have a teammate to make up for it when you make a mistake. But nonetheless, appreciate Gary Christian coming on. You can get his book on Amazon, as he said, and it should be a fun read. Beat the Course, Not Yourself. We could all do that. We'll be fine. Remember, you are the one that's in control, and you can only control that. So appreciate it. Whether life or golf, you only have one shot. Make it count. Appreciate Steve Azar. Appreciate y'all listening, and we'll talk to you all next week.